Yes, so thank you so much. It's so great to see everyone and to be back. I always have a lot of fun connecting with you, and hopefully one day when travel is reinstated, I would love to come up there, if at least even once. I know it's halfway around the world, but this is one beautiful thing about the pandemic is I can join you without flying there. So that's a plus, that's a connection. So thank you, Snejana, and all the participants. I want to say hello to Dean Kruckerberg. I met Dean when I was a doctoral student at University of Florida many years ago. And to Katerina, I don't know if she's joining us today, but Katerina Tsatsura, she is, okay. Yeah, we connected many years ago when I did my master's thesis in Bulgaria. I spent the summer there looking at public relations in a post-communist context and somehow got connected with Katerina. So it's nice to join you all today. So I know that I'm hearing I'm going to project my screen, but while I'm doing that, I know that people are very interested in personal experiences. So I'll just go ahead and maybe synopsize our experience here very briefly, and then I'll go into my actual presentation. We are Mount Royal. I'm Mount Royal University. We're in Canada, Western Canada, and our university is closed. We've been closed since March 18th or so. And I think the thing you'll find about Canadians in general is we tend to be very conservative, very low, not low risk, but moderate risk in terms of decision making and national policies and things like that. So we are closed. We had to do, like everybody else, a huge pivot into throwing all of our stuff online and just trying to get through that spring semester. So there are some classes on campus, but they're only essential, like certain labs. And you had to apply for that and you had to justify your case. And then after you were approved, you had to follow certain protocols. So a very conservative approach. Our library is open. Few people use it, but it's there because we think it's an important place that students need access to. And it's a very large building and they follow protocols. So they may be on a reduced schedule, I don't know, but our library is fairly available. The faculty were given the choice about how to make this pivot and how to conduct their classes, whether synchronous, meaning together, or asynchronous, meaning it's totally online. So that was up to the faculty to do. But what I've done is asynchronous. So we have a live lecture, live online for a class period. And then many materials are online. So students have to help themselves a little bit more. But I felt it was important to maintain some connectivity instead of just throwing a bunch of materials online. I just felt that they were going to sync, especially in the context we're in, where there's havoc all around. So I felt it was really important to maintain that touch point of a relationship, and that has worked out fine. I think what we're experiencing here is a real increase in student mental health issues. Our mental health department has just been full, and it's not just for students in terms of adjusting to this higher education, but the pandemic has put stresses on the home and the family. So and plus their jobs. So there's a compounding effect going on. It's not just about learning, but we're trying to teach in the midst of a chaotic situation, which the situation will come, but for this pivot, it's been quite hard, I think, on many students. So our student mental health numbers have gone up, and also our referrals to our early support program. We have a program where students who are struggling, instead of faculty spending a whole lot of time getting students on track, we have a department specifically for that. So we will refer struggling students there, and they'll help students as far as managing their time and staying on track. So a lot more referrals to student support. So as far as my personal experience, I am rather enjoying it, to be honest with you. Well, aside from just adjusting from the isolation, the positive parts to me are just reduced travel time, reduced pressure to, quote, be in a certain room at a certain time on a large campus. I'm finding that I'm less sort of upset about classroom management issues, like where is Johnny today? And I guess I have to call him, or why is Susie sleeping at her desk and things like that. Don't have to take attendance, you know, so those classroom management things I find have fallen off, and I'm able to focus a bit more on content. And of course, because I have these live sessions with students, we try to do really interactive things like Microsoft polls and interactive classroom exercises. That all helps keep them engaged. And I'm really big about always telling them they can contact me. I have built-in appointment times. You know, it's slotted in my day, and students can just meet me. You know, they just have to drop me a line and let me know to be online at that time. So I try to encourage that personal connection. So as far as my classes, I teach public relations writing. And I think one of the blessings that I've experienced actually is this has forced me to become a little bit more innovative. And I actually found an online educational program for students to teach them the grammar portion of the class. And it's taken a lot of pressure off of me, actually, because I think because the software is so well done, and I'm getting feedback from the students that they're really enjoying it and they're learning a lot. And so that is actually, I've actually been able to offload about maybe 25% of the classroom material onto this software program. And it only costs students like about $36 for the semester. So it's even cheaper than a textbook. So it forced me to find it. Otherwise, I may not have found it. So
maybe you could share it with us. What is this magical software? So
the magic software. Yes. So it's a company. It's a publisher called Macmillan, and they have a grammar program called Achieve. And students go online and they take a practice test in grammar, and then they get some feedback about how well they've done. I don't make it count. It's just a benchmark for them. And then the program gives them a study plan that they can work on during the semester. And I give students credit just for finishing the study plan. They don't have to have a certain grade, but if you just finish it, I'll give you 3%. And then they have a final exam, which I'm going to count. So I know they're prepared. If they've done their work, they should do well on this final grammar exam, and it counts for about 20% of their final grade. So it covers all the things that I cover in class, except it's online. And I know that in the past, I've always had students say to me, why can't we do this grammar stuff online instead of in class? I've had that feedback before. So that actually frees me up to talk more about PR writing and persuasive techniques and practice writing, because some of this little stuff, which is very important, can be offloaded. So anyway, you know, we were able to do guest speakers and everything. So I have found it to be good. I'm having a great experience online. I think the students maybe less so. Definitely they struggle with sort of the isolation of COVID, but you know, COVID will be over one day. But they're really learning. What I like about it is, yes, they're struggling, but I feel that it's a good struggle. They're learning to manage their time. they're learning to make decisions about what is most important to them. And I reflect back on Sergey's comment about, you have to get serious about your education. Professor's there. You have all the information you need to contact that professor. And, a little bit more has to fall upon student shoulders. And I actually think that's a good thing. As long as you have supports in place, I just think it can be really good for them, especially outside of COVID. COVID puts extra stress, but just the fact of being in this stage of their lives of early adulthood, this is when you should be learning these things. So I think it does feed into their developmental stage. And it also helps them make better decisions, because let's face it, some students should not be in our classes. We take them in because we're kind, and they made 1 point over the minimum to get in. So maybe they need to come to some realizations for themselves about where they need to be. So I think that is a good thing. So anyway, so that's our experience, and I'm sure we can talk about it more at the end of my presentation, but I want to be sensitive to the time. So what I've looked at and what I'm going to share with you today is just some research that I've been doing into the literature. And I guess the question that crossed my mind as I was approaching this conference is, the basic question of the conference: what might be some possible future trends? And I'm just basing this on current discussions. Of course, none of us know where we're all going to land, but I just feel that if we can look at what people are talking about and look at any studies that are coming out, that this might inform us a little bit. So I just thought I would synopsize the research that I've got so far. It's a project in process. I'm not totally done, but I'll share with you what I have today. So it's basically a systematic content analysis of both peer-reviewed and trade articles, and just between the dates March 2020 to now. So just wanted to see what people were talking about. And of course, there were thousands of hits on that, but I had to, from all over the world, there was discussion from all over the world on all kinds of things. So I had to kind of go through each one and cull it down to some things that were maybe the most relevant. So I'm sort of looking at about 60 articles right now and going through those. So I'll share with you just some trends that I'm seeing now in the discussions. So people are talking about a lot of things. They're talking about many of the things that speakers have talked about today, like transforming our campuses into different types of spaces. They're talking about challenging the university to think about what it is they really do. And certainly they're talking a lot about online learning. So I think about the few things that everybody sort of agrees on, is definitely higher education has been significantly impacted, as it has in many industries. There's lots of talk about, will this be the only pandemic? Do we need to be prepared for any future crisis like a pandemic or similar, weather-related, or any other type of crisis that could interfere with education? So far, these types of plans are not in our crisis management plans. We've never had to face them before, so here's a new opportunity sort of in crisis management planning, is how are we going to prepare and be prepared for if another crisis like this does come about. So that's been quite a lot of discussion. But certainly most people do agree that we just really need to stop and think, as Steve Milligan, I believe, was talking about. We need to ask the question, what is a university? What is it here? What does it do? What is it supposed to do? And what is it here for? And we need to rethink about this in all kinds of ways, not just in our teaching, but in our policies, in our curriculum, in our administration, in how we lead. And and to really ask ourselves some of the core questions about our universities and what they're supposed to be for. So other threads of discussion have certainly been the role of online learning. That was a trend. Questions about the brick and mortar physical buildings, as Steve Milligan talked about. There was some interesting discussion about research agendas and how they are affected in the university. And then some certain challenges and opportunities that kind of came out from some of my readings. So once again, this is a disclaimer. It's just about what's being talked about. Doesn't mean we'll necessarily land here, but it's not predictive. And of course, all of our respective geographies would play into the context of the decision-making that we all do, because we're from different parts of the world with different cultures and different economic situations and different size universities, different types of programs. But I thought it would be interesting to at least look at what people were talking about. So certainly the huge discussion is all about online tools and online learning. Probably, and thank goodness we have it, because without it, I don't know where we would be in March, you know? Thank goodness. What would we have done? I just can't even imagine. I think we would have closed. Like, what could we do? So thank goodness it's there. And it is a universal experience across universities around the world. We've all had to pivot in the same way. And so that has precipitated a lot of discussions, such as we're talking about today, about, wow, you know, we're really learning a lot about online learning, and where's this going to take us in the future? And there's a lot of consensus around the fact that we may not be totally online learning communities, but a lot of people feel that online learning will definitely be accelerated, as Sergey, I believe, was alluding to. It will definitely stay around in different ways, shapes, and forms, because we've kind of experienced the benefits of it. Here's a quote from a scholar, Wallace 2020. A growing number of colleges are now evaluating which courses can be taught successfully through online. And this trend may lead to long-lasting and/or permanent changes with improved online learning platforms and ways of teaching. So I think this is true. I think we're all probably going to be looking at, you know, what classes actually can be delivered online very well, as opposed to using valuable face-to-face time and valuable class time. There's a lot of information that can be absorbed by the student on their own in conjunction with live interaction. And when we look at e-learning, you know, it's actually been around a long time. Or so here in the North America, probably about the 1970s is when it evolved, and 1980s took a big acceleration with you know, technology and Macs coming out. And here in North America, it's historically been considered more supplemental to the face-to-face learning, and sometimes a less preferred option. Online degrees don't have the same sort of cachet as brick and mortar type degrees. But it's always been there. It's always been in the background. And just about so many people I know have either taken an online course or a small online certificate program, and some even online degrees or upgrading to get a final degree. So it does fill a space in the marketplace. I have a statistic there for you that market for online education is about 18 billion in the US, and it's projected to be 350 billion by 2025, according to the World Economic Forum. So I think what COVID has done is it's taken this thing that's been in the background of education, and it has just ricocheted it out of the gate, and has just made it, has accelerated it. So it's now in the forefront of our mind. Online learning used to be more like, well, that's, an online class, but now it's become much more forefront. So some concerns with online learning. There are quite a few concerns in terms of worldwide, a little bit more application, is there's people that are afraid that too much of this online learning will perpetuate divisions between class, races, levels of support, that maybe people who have more resources will be the ones who are able to access, the better, more sophisticated online environment, or have access to instructors more so than perhaps others. So that is a concern, but there are also many champions of online learning. It can be effective, it can be very innovative, it's very convenient for students, and there's a lot of cost savings and efficiencies that can be garnered from them. The only problem with online learning I'm reading about is that students don't always like it as much. So now my personal experience is quite divided. I find it's a love-hate thing. So either students like it or they don't. Now the students who like it, I have found, are students who more or less have their lives a bit more together, like they're working, they have responsibilities, they have goals, and they love that this online thing fits into their already productive life. The students who don't like it, I find, tend to be the students who maybe do need that support and don't do well without that. So there were a few studies about this sort of love-hate thing, but many students, especially in developing countries, seems like they're not really big fans of it. So it would seem to me that because of this kind of divide, that, as Sergey was saying, that some type of combination, some type of hybrid, where you have some options, take certain classes online, certain classes face-to-face, a combination of asynchronous and synchronous seems to be more realistic in terms of where we might fall. There are many tangential developments that can occur as a result of online learning. We could see more jobs for online tutors, so the marketplace might shift. We would definitely see innovation and competition in regards to the development of technology. Yes, when we did the pivot to COVID, a lot of professors struggled, but it was because of their sort of lack of exposure to technology. But I think if online learning becomes more of a trend, we're going to find tools that are easier to use. People will come to the marketplace and try to meet those demands, and it won't be so hard to make a video. It won't be so hard to use a conference software. It'll just all be a lot easier, but we'll also have supports in place of experts, as Sergey says. I think it was Steve or Sergey, I can't remember, but yes, I think there could be a whole little industry develop around this. And of course, the industry of more instructor training about technology and all kinds of other supports can come about. More software programs for different kinds of classes, more interesting things to do where the instructor doesn't have to come up with interactive ideas, but there are actual interactive programs like the one I mentioned that I found that's specifically made for your class that are actually quite good. So the considerations with online learning, of course, are the whole thing about labs. There are some things being done as far as remote control labs or video-based labs, but these can be difficult for a lot of different reasons. People could question the quality of the education, the quality of the assessment. And of course, there's the ever-present problem of the digital divide, which is a global problem. And even in my own class, not everybody has computers, an internet connection, a Wi-Fi or weak Wi-Fi. we actually have some of these issues in my class, and I was quite shocked. But it does exist, and well, I know it exists, but I just never personally encountered it. But I had some stats. Only 40% of people in Africa are connected, for instance. Now, of course, Europe, much better, at 87%, and North America, 95%. So, you know, could this connectivity thing leave people in the dust, or will it challenge us to bridge that gap and to shrink the digital divide? So, you know, we don't know. We hope that that we would rise to the challenge and make sure that anybody who wants to be connected can be connected. The second theme, there was lots of talk about the brick and mortar, and I'll give you another quote from Wallace. The shift to distance education could also reduce some of the need for lecture space on campus. Steve, of course, was talking all about this in his urban campus. Yeah, so if we have more online options, we're going to have less traffic on campus. We're going to need fewer classrooms, and the whole sprawling capital improvement concept of these sprawling campuses may not be so much a priority anymore. And to put our own Canadian context and probably US context into the university, we have been sprawling campuses. We're always on the go for international students and bigger buildings and more lab space and all that. But the reality is education is often not that well funded. In Canada, for example, we're only funded from our provincial governments at about 40% of our budget. And it's come down quite a bit from years ago, where it used to be much higher. So there are a lot of rising costs. It's difficult to increase tuition, and class sizes continue to grow. And so there's a lot of pressure on the system. And of course, on our own campus, we've lost a lot of revenue streams. We've lost revenue from parking fees, from the restaurants, from the dormitory income. We're not getting any rent from our conference facilities. Our concert hall is not being used because there are no concerts. And I found a statistic in the US that the loss of this across the college or university campuses from these other revenue streams is about $100 billion. That's a lot of money.
Yes, Sandra. Yep. Yes, the time is up.
Oh, the time's gone. Oh, yeah. Wow. That was quick. I'm so sorry. I guess I spent a bit too much time on my personal experience.
But it is very, very valuable. You know, you articulated it the best probably of all our speakers today, because we didn't have time for that, to discuss that, and you started with it. And it was actually a great contribution to what we have been discussing today. You mentioned so many things that we have in common. All this situation we find ourselves in right now. So I think it's very great. It's great that you did that in the beginning, so we had time for that.
So you have it.
Yes.
I'll give you a PowerPoint to. I'll share my PowerPoint with you, and you can share it with other people, because I talk about, you know, what possible future is and a few other challenges and opportunities. So it might be interesting to some people.
Of course.
Thanks so much. It's nice to talk to people who are sharing the same struggles, that's for sure.